Y'all didn't expect an iceberg like this, now didn't ya? I have strangely always found controversies and drama in the FNAF community really interesting. Like, weirdly interesting. Mostly because you wouldn't expect all of this from an indie horror franchise like Five Nights at Freddy's. However, FNAF does have a lot of drama and controversies in its community. And with this, I'm gonna be as unbiased as possible. I'm gonna try my best to state both sides of an issue and not try to favor one. Obviously, if it's something like pedophilia, a certain side is gonna be favored, but for most of this is gonna be just me stating the facts and details and not giving out my opinions and personal beliefs. Anyway, yeah, I've made a FNAF Fangame iceberg video, so I have my experience with covering icebergs. If you've never seen an iceberg video in your life before, basically the information is categorized by how well known or obscure a topic is. The top of the iceberg being topics that the general public, even outside of the FNAF community, has most definitely heard about, and the bottom of the iceberg being topics that only select people are going to know, and hell, maybe even people in the FNAF community will not even get. This iceberg was formed and created by me and a group of friends working together, so this was all a collaborative effort.
Before we begin, be sure to subscribe down below and turn on the notification bell. As well, be sure to become a channel member if you wish to see all sorts of behind the scenes, announcements, and etc. of my content. All totally optional, but it'd be appreciated if you did.
Without further ado, let's get right into this.
Scott Cawthon's retirement. This is without a doubt the most infamous controversy among the FNAF community. Essentially, what happened was on June 10th, 2021, the creator of the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise himself, Scott Cawthon, had his political donations and records leaked online, and he was found to be donating to Republican politicians who are extremely infamous for being anti-LGBTQ. A lot of people were upset at Scott, especially people in the LGBTQ community. There was also people who still supported him though at the same time. A hashtag #IStandByScott would trend on Twitter to highlight this support. All of this would end up getting to Scott's head though, because a few days later, he would post on ScottGames.com a message of him officially announcing his retirement from game development and how he wants to focus more on his family. And just like that, everyone thought Scott left. Now, of course, Scott has somewhat remained in the community to speak about things when needed, but in terms of being the main man of the community, he's not really that anymore. This whole controversy is some of the most division that you'll ever see in the FNAF community, and arguably one of the most divided controversies on the entire internet. Nobody knew whether to believe or not if Scott Cawthon was LGBT-phobic. Some further assumptions and accusations were made about Scott too after this. One of the most infamous examples being that his profile picture for so many years was meant to resemble a swastika all along. This accusation was instantly dunked on by many people. To this day, this controversy is still brought up by both the people who are against Scott, the people for Scott, or people in the middle. It's still relevant to this day, and like I said in the beginning of this entry, this remains as one of the most infamous controversies in the entire Five Nights at Freddy's community. Security breach. As of writing this script, Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach is the most recent game in the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise. When it was released, it was met with very mixed reception. There were people who absolutely loved the game and considered it one of their favorite FNAF games, whether it be for its visuals, its characters, and more. However, there were also people who disliked it or flat out hated it, and there are a variety of reasons cited for these strong negative opinions. The first and most common complaint are the amount of bugs and glitches that were present upon launch and are even still in the current version of the game. As well, Security Breach is accused of missed potential with aspects like Vanny not being explored all too much. The game was even accused of being rushed, and scrapped content is littered throughout the game's files. Another complaint people have with the game is the whole kid-friendly approach this game took that is unlike the first few FNAF games where they had a dark and grim environment. Basically, the colorful visuals and the personality-filled main animatronics being the main reasons cited for that claim. The other huge critique that people have in regards to Security Breach is the Afton ending in this game, where basically William Afton comes back yet again as Burntrap, and the Blob is there too, but while not confirmed, it's still theorized that it's the murdered children incident victims, as well as the Pizzeria Simulator souls besides Afton. This was heavily criticized for how it was possibly the reason why Vanny was shafted heavily in the game, basically like a why bring Afton back for the 100th time when Vanny could use more screen time to develop as a quality villain. The reason as usually stated for why Afton came back in the first place is fan service. This ending was heavily regarded as the moment where a lot of people in the FNAF community officially considered FNAF lore terrible, quote unquote, and the final straw moment for the criticisms against the FNAF lore building over time. Security Breach is a very controversial game among the FNAF and indie horror community in general, and there's a lot of people hoping that the Ruin DLC will quote unquote save Security Breach. Illumix. Illumix, as a lot of you may know, are the people behind the game Five Nights at Freddy's AR Special Delivery. Led by CEO Karen Sinha, these guys are infamous among the FNAF community, arguably more so than Steelwool. Their most recent issue is over the fact that they straight up abandoned FNAF AR after the release of Funtime Freddy in December 2021, only having small blasts from the past events. What made FNAF fans extremely disappointed was the lack of announcement or communication from them. Illumix dropped FNAF AR without telling anybody, and people saw it as unfortunate because of some of the things that Illumix promised to add into the game that they ended up not adding, like Lefty and the Glamrocks. However, there was a lot of people happy that Illumix was no longer working on FNAF AR because of how they would go to treat the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise when they were still making stuff. FNAF AR itself would go on a massive decline in quality in the eyes of a lot of people over the months because of an update released in May 2021 that people blame for single-handedly ruining the game. More bugs, more pay-to-win / progress bullshit, all this stuff. There's also the fact that a lot of the time they were accused of being greedy for once again their pay to progress / win decisions in the game. The skins being so lazy and obvious they were made for cheap cash. Melted Chocolate Bonnie usually being the most pointed to example in how it was a lazy reuse of another skin, Chocolate Bonnie. As well on the topic of laziness, reuse workshop animations to boot, Illumix was also infamous for ignoring community feedback for a long time whenever massive amounts of glitches and issues were made a fuss about. Illumix would also allegedly mistreat the voice actress for Ballora, Michelle Amos, by requesting her to voice lines for Ballora's addition to FNAF AR, but would bail on her at the very last second. It's implied that Michelle Amos was heavily disappointed. And then there's the absolutely infamous, maybe even real, maybe fake, but a lot of people believe it's real image where there was a Glassdoor review from an ex-Illumix employee accusing Illumix of being a toxic, overly chaotic, and daft madhouse of a company to work at, and Karen, the CEO, does terribly at her job and also is extremely inexperienced. She doesn't like video games despite being a video game company, and their most successful product ever being a video game. And she would also apparently be so dishonest and would straight up lie to her employees. If this is true, this obviously makes Illumix a much worse company than people already said it was, and a lot of people believe it because of the other greedy actions they've been accused of that are seen as 100% true. Illumix and FNAF AR slowly seem to become irrelevant to the overall FNAF community as time goes on, and people don't know whether they should be sad or celebrating. Theft King. Theft King is heavily regarded as the most controversial YouTuber in the Five Nights at Freddy's community for a multitude of reasons. Starting off with the main reasons in order, his first true controversy in a way was not really FNAF related, but still indie horror related. Basically, Feth would make videos criticizing Poppy Playtime and its developers, Mob Games. Mob Games, especially for the actions they've done in the past, such as NFTs and cyberbullying a minor. However, Theft would randomly be approached out of nowhere by Mob Games, and he would backtrack and start supporting Poppy Playtime, also out of nowhere. His next biggest controversy would be in regards to the cancelled Fanverse pitch game, Aftonville, which we'll get to later in the iceberg in more detail. But essentially, Theft King would interview the developer of the game, Jelly Liam, and it turned out this interview broke Jelly Liam's NDA. After he heard and realized about this, he requested for Feth to take the video down, but he refused. Then, Feth's next big controversy would end up being the biggest one that would be the one that got him ultimately cancelled for a good bit. Basically, Popgo's developer, Kate Carter, would tweet out a meme in regards to the rise of videos that state that the Fazbear Fanverse initiative was dead and cancelled and a bad idea, obviously being made for clickbait purposes. The most popular offenders of this being Sheep Rampage and Feth King. Kane and everyone else was brainlights this issue because of how much of the Fanverse's reputation was getting ruined by these clickbait videos, that being possible because of how impressionable young children and teenagers are, which is estimated to be the typical age group demographic for Theft and Sheep Rampage's videos. Now, Sheep Rampage will get to later in the iceberg, but Feth King got upset at this tweet. Long story short, despite the fact that Kane never explicitly stated it was Feth had a fit about what was being said. This led to Feth King making a video called An Open Letter to King Carter. In the video, he would say how he has always respected Kane in his work, as well he would show examples of him not being negative about the Fanverse, and furthermore, he would go on to talk about stuff like how apparently Kane ignored Feth King's DMs, which was proven to be false. As a response to this video, Kane seemingly posted his response in a form of a twitlonger that provided a YouTube link. When you pressed on the link, however, it turned out to be a FNAF Rickroll, which was created by Fisnum. Fisnum has used this video before as a troll response to criticism that he's received as not proper criticism. This received a mixed response among the community. People thought it was hilarious and thought Theft King deserved it. Other people thought Kane was representing the Fanverse in a really bad way by doing this. This troll response would lead Feth King to starting a 5-hour live stream where he would basically play Popgo's 2016 but also talk about the situation. Kane and some of his fans would start basically sending donations with messages meant to either be criticism or jokes at Feth King's expense. Kane would also post on a second Twitter account, Pop Goes Lost and Found, evidence of Feth and Kane talking and accusing him of fake crying on stream, and he would try to get Feth to look at it on stream so his audience would be aware of what's truly happening. Near the end of the stream, however, Theth Kane would say something that would be considered one of the most controversial and worst things to ever be said by an influencer in the FNAF community.
I think Kane Carter is a vindictive, evil person. You know, I'm not religious, but like if there was a hell, Kane Carter will burn for eternity. Like that's straight up the kind of person I think he is. He's vindictive and likes to see people suffer.
While this little quote and moment here got some laughs and memes created, ultimately this would be seen as the final nail in the coffin to Theth Kane's reputation. Most people in the FNAF community stopped liking Theft after this. Theth Kane started losing subscribers, but the whole Kane Carter controversy was what made him by far the most controversial YouTuber in the entire FNAF community. The Pair. I've discussed this controversy before on my Fangame Iceberg, but to go over it again, on June 10th, 2022, it was anonymously revealed that Fangame developers, Junior's developer Remanov, Chomper's developer Ultranite, and Project Readjusted developer Mechless had a secret Discord group called The Pair, which was created to basically have the user recognition among the FNAF community to manipulate people and to get power over GameJolt and FNAF Fangame developers / development teams, which included leaking private info about FNAF Fangames, Fanverse included, and the developers of these games themselves. When it came to the developers, the personal information leaked would consist of full names, Facebook profiles, etc., and was all put in a big file that was destined to be posted on 4chan. One of these developers also happened to be Scott Cawthon, which the information that was going to be leaked about him were his private wedding video and many pictures of him and his family that were not public. Screenshots of this group chat in action were also posted, proving it was all real. They even went as far as to use transphobic and sexist slurs against critics of their games, as well as other people like Popgo's artist / King Carter's girlfriend, Turntail. These three developers were also found to go as far as to purposely try to make alt accounts to bump down fan games that were on the GameJolt's FNAF Best section they considered unworthy, so therefore their games would be moved up. After all this happened, basically Raymond finished and released Juniors and dipped from the FNAF community. Although as of writing this script, a DLC is planned for Juniors despite Raymond's leave. Ultranite would delete his social media accounts and leave too. Mechless tried to play victim. Another thing that happened as a result of the pair was in relation to the whole GameJolt ratings and bumping up and down games that they were doing that I brought up earlier. GameJolt actually acknowledged the situation and they removed Raymond and Ultranite's accounts. Mechless's account was still kept up, however. This controversy is ingrained in a lot of FNAF fans' minds because of how it involved three developers that were respected and considered to be trusted, but then of course, they went behind the community's back. Fazbear Frights. The Fazbear Frights novels are a series of FNAF books that have 3 stories and an epilogue each, and they play out as a FNAF version of Goosebumps. There are 12 books in total in the series, and these books are seen as semi-controversial. The main reason being that some of the stories contain plots and other elements that are seen as very weird and even fetishy. Some of the biggest examples being In the Flesh from the book Bunny Call, where the ending is basically MPreg, aka male pregnancy, where the story's main protagonist, Matt, cuts open his stomach, and then a baby Springtrap comes out, even calling Matt Daddy. Another example being He Told Me Everything from the book The Cliffs, which centers around this gooey substance called Fazgoo that essentially replaces people and turns them into blobs. This creature even returns in the Puppet Carver story from the book of the same name. There's also the Sea Bonnies from the story of the same name from the book Friendly Face, which basically turns flesh of others into sea bonnies, whether that be a goldfish or possibly even humans. These stories are heavily criticized for being too weird and out of place for a story that is still supposed to be about Five Nights at Freddy's. It is seen as more controversial due to how this is official FNAF media and not some fan-made creation. There's also the fact that people see these books as pointless when it comes to FNAF and its lore. All of this stuff seems to turn people off from the books. There's also the Tales from the Pizzaplex books, which are not seen as controversial, but there are a few stories that do stand out for being controversial, which they'll be talked about much later in the iceberg. FNAF lore. The FNAF lore is an entry on this iceberg because of how people view it nowadays and what the theory culture in the community has become. With several FNAF games and books releasing over the years, the lore has been getting more and more complex in the eyes of many people, so much to the point where people have even deemed it as impossible to figure out. There are several popular theories, mostly started by game theory, but often can be by a few others, that are both favored and not favored by people. Some of those popular theories will have their own entries on the iceberg, such as the Dream Theory, Gregbot, the Adult Theory, and more. As well, people accuse the FNAF lore of going downhill because of Help Wanted and Security Breach, whether it be Glitch Trap or Burn Trap in the Blob, which I already explained in the Security Breach entry. Some people even say that the FNAF lore started to go downhill with Sister Location with the whole sci-fi element to it all. The theory culture has also been seen as more toxic nowadays due to constant arguing and all of that sorts. That's also led to some people no longer caring about the lore of the series and care more about the other aspects of the series like the gameplay. Whatever the case, the FNAF lore is different to how it was back in the early years of the franchise. FNAF World. FNAF World is a game that has a mixed reception among the FNAF community. There are people who love the game and consider it an underrated masterpiece, and then there's people who didn't like the game and thought it was a ridiculous direction to take FNAF after FNAF 4. Some people argue that people just didn't like it because it was different for the time, considering it did come out after 4 literal horror games. The hate for this game has also been more validated to people because of how Scott Cawthon himself doesn't even like this game. He went on record to admit that the game was rushed, and he uses it as a learning experience to not assume that the fans would love anything he puts out. Because of how rushed it was in his point of view, he took it off Steam, offered refunds, and put the game up for free on GameJolt. There are people who defend FNAF World, and there are people who see it as a misstep for the franchise. Like I already said, it's mixed among people. Gregbot. Gregbot is basically a security breach theory, and one of the more popular ones. Started by MatPat of Game Theory, this theory basically suggests that the security breach protagonist Gregory is a robot, and furthermore, is a robot version of the crying child from Five Nights at Freddy's 4. Evidence used to suggest this theory is that the fact that Glamrock Freddy at the beginning of the game says that Gregory is quote-unquote broken. As well, when Vanny's chasing you, the fact that the visuals get all disorienting has led people to believe this theory, and in terms of the parallels to the crying child, mostly his appearance is what's used as evidence. This is a controversial theory among the FNAF community because of how admittedly outlandish it is. It is 50-50 in the fandom in regards to if people believe it or not. Half of the community does, half of the community doesn't. MatPat has even acknowledged that people that don't believe the theory. This theory, despite being extremely controversial, is the most popular theory to come from Security Breach, so the idea is always going to be brought up for a long while. Jonochrome. As you likely know, Jonochrome is the creator of the 1-8 Flumpties series. One of the FNAF fan game series is associated with the Fazbear Fanverse initiative. On November 8th, 2021, a tweet long was posted onto Twitter by an anonymous account accusing Jonochrome of grooming a minor, Jono being 22 and the victim being 14. A relationship with these two apparently began. Screenshots from various sources were linked with this as proof. When this tweet long was initially released, people were in denial and didn't believe it. The main reason being that people saw it as too much of a coincidence this was coming out a few days after the release of Flumpties 3. Heavily regarded as one of the best FNAF fan games of all time. However, the people in denial would sadly be proven wrong as later, Popgo's developer King Carter would state that the tweet long was true and Jono admitted to everything on it, and then Jonochrome himself would release a statement basically confessing to the accusations. It basically turned out it was all true. He would still try to defend himself on this statement with various other statements such as how they weren't trying to be sexual in this relationship, but he was also accusing the person of coming out about it in the first place, only doing it out of spite. The victim would later come out about it too, defending John for the most part, confirming that the interactions were indeed not sexual, and even claimed that Jono did apologize to her and John would be receiving therapy. However, she would still consider what John did as grooming. Afterwards, Jono would further apologize and would leave the internet saying he might return someday, and that was it. This controversy was extremely divided in the FNAF community. There was one side that defended John, believing he didn't do anything wrong, and or that they were glad he was seeking therapy for his past mistakes, and there was the other side that completely shamed John for what he did, declared him a pedophile and child groomer, and were happy he left. Some people even saying that his responses came off as guilt-trippy and insincere. Most people seem to be on the latter side of claiming he's a pedophile, and this unfortunately would somewhat ruin the reputation of 1-8 Flumpties. Again, this happened not too long after the third Flumpties released, which was met with a lot of success. So these true allegations just soured a lot of success the game could have had without the allegations, and people would go as far as to say this would ruin the reputation of Fazbear Fanverse initiative, but I'm personally not going to go that far. Regardless, Jonochrome is gone for right now, seeking therapy, and to this day in the FNAF community, this controversy is still talked about. Funko. Now, Funko is the company behind most of the merchandise for the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise, ranging from their claim to fame, Funko Pops, to their plushies, action figures, mystery minis, and more. Now, the general reception behind this merchandise is pretty mixed. There's people that absolutely adore them and even collect them, and there's also the people that take issue with some of it. Whether it be how some claim that some of the figures are reuses of previous figures, some people just don't like the designs of certain plushies. Just in general, the detractors of the FNAF Funko merch usually claim that Funko tends to cut corners for their products, not even just FNAF. Funko has even gone into some controversial situations among the FNAF community. One of the most infamous cases being how before the release of Security Breach, they leaked the designs of the main 4 glam rocks, including their names, which actually prompted a response from Scott Cawthon. The turnout being the Security Breach statues that were released later that year, which most people did in fact like. Niche. I've also touched on this in my fangame Iceberg, but I'll of course go over it again. So Niche, also known as Blackout, is the developer behind the infamous FNAF fangame Dormitibus. Dormitibus was, and still is, infamous among the FNAF community for its story involving the girl who becomes Chica, named Maria in this game's universe, was raped to death by Garvey Wright, this game's version of William Afton. Nearly shown in the Cardboard Theater minigame, explained in newspapers and tapes.
There's this hot 15-year-old that was part of the kids' friends group. You know, it was fun. She screamed, but nobody heard her. It was so much fun.
It's a story a grand majority of the FNAF community are against, it being enough for people to declare this game one of the worst FNAF fan games of all time. However, what made this game's lore worse was that it turned out the person who developed the game and wrote the story, Niche, was also a pedophile just like Garvey. Dude has a lot of accusations to his name, like hypocrisy, blackmailing, manipulating, but pedophilia and his fetishes were by far his most major ones and the ones that would end up getting him cancelled and exiled from the FNAF community. These fetishes included rape and murder fetishes and necrophilia, the attraction to dead bodies. And then, the pedophilia. He would have disgusting and sexual interactions with a 12-year-old, even sending inappropriate pictures and straight-up nudes, one example being of his ass. Allegedly, there was also other minors that were victims in Niche's disgusting behavior. This is going to be one of the only entries on this iceberg where I'll be biased and say that what Niche did was extremely fucked up and his cancellation from the FNAF community was deserved. Hopefully the Dormitibus remake that everyone is talking about, which won't have Niche's involvement, will fix the story issues people had with the game before, and yeah. Fistnum. So this is another topic I covered in my fangame Iceberg. Essentially, Fistnum, the developer working on FNAF Plus as part of the Fazbear Fanverse initiative, has been in several controversies with the FNAF community. Some examples of these controversies being how he would criticize the Final Night series by Jelly Liam, which some people saw as too harsh. Phil has also been accused of being harsh when responding to FNAF YouTubers like Dawko. There's also accusations of him being ableist and anti-autism. However, the counter-argument to this accusation is that he's worked in the past with many non-divergent people and even still does, currently one of those people being Stupid Butterfly, aka Ellie. There's also how when Security Breach released, Phil essentially streamed it live on YouTube and hated the game and wanted to leave the FNAF community because of how he wasn't a fan of the direction the FNAF series was going. Some people respected his opinion and shared the same opinions, but people legitimately got upset with him for it, saying that he was too harsh and that he ultimately made the Security Breach discourse worse, quote unquote. This whole Security Breach debacle has even made some people question whether or not they wanted to support FNAF Plus. Now, a lot of these controversies in regards to Phil have been counter-argued with either the fact that what he says is just his opinion, or that Phil being an asshole, quote-unquote, is more so an online character persona than an actual personality, and he's a chill guy inside. Regardless, Phil Snum is a semi-controversial figure in the FNAF community. There's a lot of people that don't like him, but there's a lot of people that love him, whether it be for FNAF Plus, his streams on YouTube, or just him in general. They like his personality. There's two sides to this, basically. FNAF Plus designs. This entry is referring to how when it comes to the character designs for FNAF Plus, the FNAF 1 reimagining associated with the Fazbear Fanverse initiative that's being developed by Fistnum, they are criticized by a decent amount of people constantly. The argument comes from the designs being forced creepiness, quote-unquote. Basically meaning the designs try way too hard to be scary, which people saw as a turn-off because of how FNAF 1 mastered unintentional creepiness for its character designs. However, there's a lot of people that at the same time believe the designs are cool and Phil did a really good job on them, and as a result, they become hyped for FNAF Plus. Now, of course, both sides clash and there's fights, blah blah blah, Twitter, YouTube, Discord, Reddit, yeah. It's another case where people in the community are divided on an aspect about the FNAF franchise where there's people who have one opinion and then there's other people that think the exact opposite, and they ultimately just need to respect each other's opinions. Some do, some don't, and that is essentially that. This comes from Inside. This Comes From Inside is the name of the Security Breach song by the Living Tombstone, being their 6th official song based off of the FNAF series. Now, this is on the iceberg most likely because of how when this song was released, it was met with very mixed results. There were people who enjoyed the song and even thought it was one of the Living Tombstone's best or considered it one of their favorite FNAF songs, and then there were the people who didn't like it at all, and it was for multiple reasons. One of the cited reasons being that the autotune throughout the song was too much and didn't sound good. Another reason cited for why people didn't like this song was because of how pessimistic and negative the meaning of the song was. Essentially, This Comes From Inside is a song that on the surface seems like your average FNAF song, but in fact, it's a song that is meant to serve as some type of commentary on how FNAF and the FNAF community has changed for the worse. The middle part of the song is what's usually the piece of evidence suggested toward this interpretation of the song's meaning. Some people have even theorized that the lyrics imply Scott Cawthon is to blame for the current state of FNAF. Of course, people on Twitter were talking about it, and another controversial part about this whole thing was that when those people went to talk about it, there would also be people saying to them that it's just a FNAF song and nothing else, and to stop looking into something that isn't there. This would lead to arguments and bitching, and yeah. Obviously, nothing is confirmed in regards to what This Comes From Inside means, since the Living Tombstone has never outright stated or even hinted outside of the song anything. It could just be a regular FNAF song about murderous animatronics, or it could be a song addressing the FNAF franchise and its community. Nobody knows. So many guards I can. This entry is referring to what is basically a meme, but people also at the same time hate the source material the meme is referencing. So basically the line of "so many guards I can" is a reference to the musical animation video by Lou Higini called Five Nights at Freddy's 3 the Musical, where Springtrap sings about how much he wants to rape the night guard.
This attraction is great, so many guys I can rape.
Now, people tend to either meme or hate on this because of the animation's quality and the very out-of-pocket edginess in its lyrics that some people consider distasteful. This also went for every single other FNAF Lou Higini musical, and not even just FNAF. All of theirs. Especially the Undertale musical, which has been endlessly memed on too.
Story of Undertale.
Now, Lou Higini himself has also been a semi-controversial YouTuber in the past. He's been accused of before of taking down channels that speak negatively of him, so he's also seen as someone who can't take constructive criticism or opinions. It's something else, man. Dream Theory. The dream theory is considered a controversial theory in the FNAF theorizing community nowadays. Originally proposed and started by MatPat of Game Theory in 2015 after FNAF 4 came out, the theory suggested that every FNAF game up until FNAF 4 was all a dream or nightmare of the crying child. Evidence being used were that the beak of the Chica figure owned by the girl in the FNAF 4 Night 3 minigame being on the floor was to resemble Toy Chica's lack of a beak whenever she's on her way to attack you in FNAF 2, as well as the odor reason for FNAF 1 and 2's determination of notice being a child's interpretation of the work life and getting fired. There's FNAF 1 to 3 6 a.m. screen sound effects seemingly coming from the grandfather clock in the crying child's house from FNAF 4. There's a lot. MatPat would even host a live stream dedicated to this theory, bringing on popular FNAF content creators at the time like Dawko, Smike, the Ryans, and Razbowski. Scott himself even played a part. Now, back in the day, this theory was actually seen as plausible to people, but that was the reason why people didn't like it. The thought if the dream theory was the answer, then it would have been dissatisfying of a conclusion and it would have been lame. There are even people who argue to this day that what was inside the box from FNAF 4 Night 7 was the final piece of evidence that confirms the dream theory. Going off of that, Scott would seemingly change up the FNAF floor by sister location, making FNAF 1 to 3 real, and just never confirmed what was inside the box, which remains as one of FNAF's biggest mysteries to this day. The dream theory nowadays in 2023 is seen as a complete joke of a theory considering its history, and it's something from FNAF's past that people try to forget about. Afton built. Afton Built was a FNAF fan game in development for 2 years that was originally for the Fazbear Fanverse initiative developed by Gelatine, and headed by Jelly Liam, who's known for the Final Night series. After the game's pitch was rejected by Scott Cawthon, Gelatine released a pre-alpha build of the game on April 12, 2022. The game centered around you playing as a mechanic who agrees to help Afton build a new animatronic body for him. Afton's motivation would be so he could continue his crimes throughout the series. The gameplay offered a variety of things, such as, for example, being given tasks, often or not involving the scrap main animatronics, initially being met with praise and such questions as, why was this rejected? Notori Sky, the communications manager of Gelatine, not too long after the release of the build, posted an FAQ devlog on the GameJolt page which answered common questions about the game and what happened when it came to being rejected from the fanverse. The main takeaway was that the game was rejected mostly because Scott saw the game as too ambitious and too risky to take in. The development team of Gelatine was disappointed but still professionally accepted what happened. However, the head of the team, Jelly Liam, would differ from this. Liam would be approached by at the time rising to fame content creator Fethkane for him to make a video containing information provided by Liam himself via a Discord interview. This video of Fethkane would release later called Afton Built, the fall of a FNAF fan game. Some of the statements and claims Liam made in this video would paint Scott Cawthon and the fanverse in a negative light, and he would end up regretting some of the things he said. Enough regrets where he would try to convince Fethkane to cut out some of those statements he regrets saying. Fethkane would agree to one of those requests, that being the removal of the word Discord due to how it revealed ClickTeam and Gelatine would communicate via Discord. Liam would sign an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, when pitching Afton Built to the fanverse, basically a contract. And the true controversy started coming in when it was realized by people that Liam broke his NDA with that Fethkane video. Somebody contacted Kane Carter about this, who would then speak with Liam, where Liam admitted to breaking his NDA. In this conversation, it was shown that Liam thought the worst that could happen legally for breaking an NDA was a cease and desist letter, which Kane was quick to point out that for breaking an NDA, it can be far worse in consequences if Scott were to take action. Later on, one of the members of Gelatine, IVGM, would come out about how the interview that took place between Feft and Liam was done without the approval of the Gelatine development team and didn't support what Liam was saying and doing. Disappointed about their reputations being put to stake because of their lead, Liam would then eventually go to Fethkane requesting to remove the video for the whole legal consequences thing, and as a last-ditch effort, Liam would lie to Feth about the fanverse developers and ClickTeam, threatening to get him in trouble. Feth, without permission, took something meant just for Feth to see only, made a pinned comment insulting the fanverse developers by calling them clowns. Liam would make a public apology to everyone involved as well as the community and would leave from the community for a whole while for personal reflection. Feth would make a statement in the response to the apology saying that the people holding Liam accountable should be ashamed, and Fethkane's video on Afton Built would prove to be a success. However, around 4 months later, when Feth would be the center of controversy in the FNAF community, Liam would apparently delete screenshots from the interview except for a few and screenshot those and post them as an effort to apparently defame Fethkane. That ended up being a whole other can of worms. The Afton Built controversy remains as one of the most infamous controversies in the community because of the events that went down, especially when it comes to the fanverse. It's a mindfuck. Five Nights in Anime.
Five Nights in Anime is a FNAF fan game series created by Mirasu, which centers around turning the FNAF animatronics, including the whole game of FNAF 1, into an anime style, and basically, these games are considered controversial due to how sexualized the animatronics are, uncensored and openly shown boobs and everything. Outside of being seen as just weird, some people have even seen a bigger problem, that being the sexualized animatronics are haunted by children. Mirasu has gone on record to state that the children don't exist in the game's universe, but regardless, people still either don't respect the game or they just poke fun at it.
Mando Pony.
Andrew Stein, known as Mando Pony, was a music artist on YouTube who had their hand in making a decent amount of FNAF songs that were popular with a lot of people, especially in the older days of the franchise. Songs such as Survive the Night, Just Gold, Balloons, Noticed, and even the Chica song. In 2020, he would be exposed and accused of having pedophilic and sexual relations with minors, cheating on his wife, gaslighting, and other things. This included nudes being sent to the minors in question, some even confirming that the accusations were in fact true due to how they show Andy himself in these pictures. A lot of people were extremely disappointed in him, especially since Andy created some iconic music from back in the day. A lot of that music too is either unlisted or had comments disabled. It's still in some FNAF fans' minds to this day, and it's pretty clear to see why.
Springtrap's jump scare.
This is in reference to how people responded to Springtrap's jump scare in FNAF 3 when the game first came out. Before the release of Five Nights at Freddy's 3, Springtrap was hyped up to be this threatening antagonist, especially in the trailer where Springtrap is against the wall. People were excited, especially since this was going to be the last FNAF game. When the game came out, people were liking how he was in the gameplay. They saw him as intimidating.
but when it came to the jump scare, it was instantly marked off as not scary, and FNAF 3 was seen as a disappointment to some people. Scott Cawthon didn't like this reception for his finale, so that's why he made FNAF 4, and as we'll get to on later on this iceberg, the situation with Springtrap's jump scare repeats. It's crazy to think that everything post FNAF 3 would have never happened if Springtrap's jump scare was received well by people. That thought alone scares me, honestly. Movie Red Eyes. This is in reference to how when the trailer for the FNAF movie released, there was a huge fuss made about the red eyes the animatronics had during certain parts of the trailer. There were some people who didn't mind them, but there was the majority which thought they were either goofy or over the top when it came to horror. A huge request made to Blumhouse by fans is to get the red eyes replaced with the black with white dot possessed eyes prominent in the games, a huge enough request that some would say rivals the internet request to change Sonic's design for the Sonic movie. No official comment by Blumhouse or anyone involved in the movie has been made in relation to this issue people have, so yeah. Lady Fissy. Amis Chatavari, famously known as Lady Fissy, was one of the official artists for the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise, hired by Scott Cawthon to create various art for the series such as the teaser for the Twisted Ones, the menu for Pizzeria Simulator, the covers for Fazbear's Fright books, etc. However, Lady Fissy is universally disliked among the FNAF community for a multitude of reasons. Those reasons include openly outright transphobic statements being said by her, making fan fictions where Afton's a pedophile and necrophiliac towards the bodies of his victims, confessing to literally enjoying lolicon, shotacon, and other forms of child gore, anti-Semitism, and much more. For years, Fissy would be constantly called out for these actions, and something would never be done up until 2023. The hate for Fissy got so strong and enough that around early 2023, a hashtag was made and spread around Twitter, #FireLadyFissy, as an effort to encourage Scott to fire her from the series. Which ended up working. She got fired. To have someone in the community be like this already turns heads, but the fact it was someone associated with the official franchise just made it worse for people. And that's not the only official FNAF artist we're talking about. Case in point, Pinky Pills. Claudia Schroeder, famously known online as Pinky Pills, is another official FNAF artist hired by Scott Cawthon to work on art for the franchise. She has done artwork for Pizzeria Simulator for the ads and Fruity Maze illustrations. She's done artwork for Ultimate Custom Night for the Toy Chica cutscenes. She's done a decent bit. In terms of why people don't like her, basically Pinky has been accused of tracing, and she's also worked on some rather questionable NSFW content. Unlike Fissy though, there has never really been a proper call to arms by the community to get her fired, but yeah. FNAF artists being controversial is something that isn't on everyone's FNAF controversy bingo card, and some people say Scott should have done a better job when checking out these people to hire them. King Carter racism. This one is a tricky one. So for the years, King Carter, PopGo's developer, has been accused of racism, like apparently discrediting American history. However, the most infamous case being in November 2022, where at first, the situation wasn't even about racism. He basically made comments on the Mangles gender debate, which people perceived as transphobic. During the heat of this outrage, it was dug up and revealed to the Twitter masses that King Carter, a white man, has said the N-word multiple times, admitting this to Fistum even by outright stating he said the A ending variant of the word 22 times in his DMs with Phil. Kane has even said statements like this, which made the situation worse. The black community associated with the FNAF community voiced their complaints as well as other people in the community. This prompted a public response and apology from King Carter, which received a mixed reception of people who thought his apology was sincere versus people who thought it wasn't and undermined the issue at hand. Other things were discovered, like apparently a SoundCloud profile of Kane's, which allegedly had a lot of material with the N-word on it, and people called it an obsession thing. There's people that believe he's a racist, but there's a lot of other people who don't. It's basically up to the interpretation of you to form what you think is going on. Nixon transphobia. So basically, this controversy stems from statements that Nixon, the creator of the Joy of Creation series associated with the Fazbear fanverse, used to make regarding the topic of transgender people. Nixon has gone on record to state things like outright saying to a transgender woman that they're not a woman. There's screenshots of this through both Discord and Twitter. People were obviously upset by this, however there's also the fact that Nixon has since gone back on these statements and is no longer transphobic, admitting so when asked by fellow user and friend of mine, Spongy124, for a statement. There's people that believe it's it's great that Nixon changed and support him now, but there's also people that believe he hasn't changed, or whether or not he has, he still does not deserve support along with the Joy of Creation series as a whole. Again, just like the King Carter racism, it's up to you on what your opinion on the matter is. It's very divided. Tyler Ulstrom. Tyler Ulstrom is known as the developer of the original Return to Freddy series. He's for sure one of the most infamous names in the entire community. He's up there with Nietzsche and the Pear People almost. Basically, as a rundown of what he's done, he's attempted to steal Candy the Cat from Emil Mako as an effort to copyright the character so he could use Candy for his own stuff, even renaming Candy as Sugar to get by. This can be seen in the first Return to Freddy's game. He's also done some of the illegal and stole Scott's code from previous FNAF games to use in his own work. He has faked his own death for publicity and attention for the fourth Return to Freddy's. He's generally an asshole to anybody who rejects any help and also constructive criticism, calling his critics jealous haters. And there's this stuff regarding him and his ex-girlfriend, who he has claimed was his sister and that they've sexually interacted with each other. He's even gone as far as to place self-inserts of himself and his ex in his games that were considered to be weird in their portrayals, even post-breakup. This man is frowned upon in the FNAF community and is someone a lot of people do not like and do not miss. Oh yeah, sister location video. This entry is referring to how on October 25th, 2022, the FNAF YouTuber Oh Yeah released a video called I Do Not Like Sister Location. In the video, he goes into detail on why he personally doesn't like FNAF Sister Location, even having another FNAF YouTuber, Postra, as a special guest. He would criticize everything there was to the base game, like the gameplay and story and characters. When the video was released, it was met with a mixed response among people. There were people that enjoyed the video and even agreed with it, one of those people even being MatPat himself.
Recently, I think it's the Yeah channel who did like an hour-long review of Sister Location being like, I don't like that one. And I'm like, I never did either, so I'm glad that someone else is actually seconding me on that one.
However, there was an extremely noticeable amount of people that started endlessly hating on Oh Yeah for his video, from tweets to YouTube comments to even videos. One of these people criticizing Oh Yeah was someone notable too, that being one of the former moderators of the FNAF subreddit, Misco. He would say how Oh Yeah is a mediocre nobody YouTuber and his video was bad and was full of unoriginal points, even though he also claims in his tweet he didn't watch it. Funnily enough, fan vs developer Fistum would release a video titled Oh Yeah Sister Location video has some interesting comments, where he would poke fun at the comments being sent at Oh Yeah's way to dunk on him for his video. The whole thing calmed down, of course. Oh Yeah even made a video on FNAF Sister Location's custom night to kick off 2023, which was actually positive. Some people in the FNAF community have different opinions from others, and this situation really shows that. Smike. Smike is a name that most of y'all have definitely heard of. He was known back in the 2014 and 2015 days of FNAF for his top 10 facts videos as well as his teaser videos and more. He's also somewhat known for his Skyrim content before he made content on the FNAF series. Smike is considered an extremely nostalgic FNAF YouTuber to a lot of fans in the community, and Smike unfortunately doesn't really upload anymore. However, there's been a decent amount of controversy tied to this man, as he was also somewhat hated back in the day, believe it or not. Whether it be people claiming his content was quote-unquote easy to make, people claiming some of the facts in his top 10 facts videos being kind of interesting in a bad way.
NF number 8 is that Toy Freddy, well, you know, he's kinda, fat. I mean, come on, you know, come on, what can I say? He's gained a few pounds. I mean, look at him compared to the other animatronics.
And his most notable controversy, the fan art situation, where he basically in his old deleted videos, which were the top 10 facts videos, he used fan art uncredited, and this eventually caught up to him and he had to delete every video containing the fan art, which afterwards, he proceeded to re-release the top 10 facts videos, but without the fan art. He also apparently made other fan artists sign contracts that basically say he can use their fan art, which obviously didn't sit right with the community. The contract thing didn't go anywhere, but still. There's also the fact that even though at the time, he was a major player in the FNAF content creator field, constantly making top 10 facts videos about the series, he never played the games for a long while.
Hey, what's up guys, it is Mike here, and welcome to my very first Five Nights at Freddy's Let's Play. Now I do have to admit something to you guys, I've never actually played Five Nights at Freddy's before.
Yeah, this didn't sit right with people either, but oh well. Despite all this, Smike is still a mostly respected figure in the community, and whenever there's signs of him making a return, people usually get excited, so he isn't completely hated, as in the hearts of many FNAF fans. Elude him. Eludum is a primarily FNAF YouTuber who's been in the community since the beginning of the franchise's inception, having nearly 5 million subscribers as of me writing this script. However, despite being one of the original YouTubers in the community, he is usually nowadays considered not such a great YouTuber in the eyes of the FNAF community, and it's usually not because of the person making the content, more so the content itself. The content of Eludum's channel, and has always been for years, are no commentary videos on mostly FNAF, but also on other indie horror games, especially as of lately. Whether these no commentary videos be gameplays, jumpscare compilations, a look at the extras menus, and more, and usually these videos would be mass uploaded in the span of literal hours. His content is seen as a content farm, quote unquote, which are usually defined as content on a YouTube channel where the sole point of it is to milk the ever-living fuck out of a certain topic for views and money, whether it be internet drama, news, or even media like games or movies or shows. Five Nights at Freddy's is no stranger to content farms given its popularity, and Eludum's channel is usually seen as the biggest example of a FNAF content farm. There's some people that don't see it as a bad thing entirely, while some people are critical over it. Freddy in Space 2 teaser. Basically, this entry is referring to how before the release of Freddy in Space 2, there was a teaser for the game on scottgames.com, which showed a teaser of Space Freddy and Roxanne Wolf. What was so controversial about the teaser was how they were drawn. Roxanne Wolf was given huge honkers, and Glamrock Freddy was given a bulge. How interesting. Character Encyclopedia. This entry is concerning the FNAF Character Encyclopedia book that was released on February 7th, 2023. The purpose of this book is to detail information on literally every character in the FNAF franchise. Well, not really. Yeah, one of the main reasons why people heavily criticize this book and tear it apart is the absence of multiple characters, some that are literally important in FNAF. The biggest examples being Michael Afton and Phone Guy, which people question why they and other such characters aren't in it since really minor in comparison characters like the FNAF AR skins, book characters, and minor game characters like Egg Baby or Magician and Little Joe. Another thing this book is criticized by the community for is misinformation. One example is how Bon Bon's page states that he appears in FNAF 3, which is not true, and he actually first appears in Sister Location. People say that for a book they claim could have been of use for various purposes, it was ultimately a disappointment to them. Pogo's Pizzeria. Pogo's Pizzeria is a FNAF YouTuber who started peaking in popularity in 2020. He would make videos on a lot of topics in regards to FNAF, and he still does to this day. However, Pogo's was, and often still is, hated for a multitude of reasons. Firstly, his content used to be accused of just being lazy and only being put out for views, clickbait, misleading content, and all that jazz. He's even made videos that were considered infamous, like his AR Golden Freddy video. But there's way more than just that. He's sensitive to constructive criticism, and he has even encouraged harassment against his critics. He has scammed people. For example, there was a FNAF plush tuber named Happy Nightmares who was notable for his series and collabs that contained his FNAF plushies. Pogo's pretty much scammed the guy by having Happy send him a Spring Bonnie plush, and Pogo's was supposed to send back a Frost Bear custom and a fake Freddy plushie. But Pogo's put the Spring Bonnie plush up for sale for $200 and didn't ever give Happy the plush back. Along the way, Pogo's kept making excuses, one of them being that his parents won't let him. Also, even more to add on, when Happy questioned Pogo's where the Frost Bear custom and fake Freddy plushies were, Pogo said they got lost in Texas, which ended up being a lie. And he actually did end up sending a Spring Bonnie plush to Happy, but it wasn't even the actual one Happy sent to Pogo's. It was a different one. Pogo's has gone on record to be transphobic as well, one example being him showing his disgust for a transgender person joining his Discord server around the time. As well on his Twitter, he would respond to Illumix and the FNAF AR Twitter accounts when he didn't get his way, which was considered rude. He was also found to be abusing his editor at the time, Woofy, and he has even actively stolen money from his parents' bank account and using that as payment to Woofy for his editing. Like I said earlier, Pogo still makes content to this day, and a lot of people have seemed to forgot what he's done, and well, that's something. Radiance. Radiance is known for making fan games such as the 2020 version of Five Nights at Treasure Island, A Blood is Casa, Five Nights at Chuck E. Cheese Rebooted, and more. Now, basically, the controversy with these guys is objectively not as extreme as some others like Nietzsche or Jonathan or Tyler Ulstrom. Basically, these guys, according to a lot of people, are just huge dicks. The only reason it's down this low in the iceberg is really because of how not known it is. Slurs would often be used in their conversations. Due to this, they would be accused of being bigots. There's a multitude of examples of this from a lot of people. Hell, it's become somewhat of a concern to people that Scott is even on board, and according to Radiance themselves on Twitter, they're pretty much blacklisted from the fanverse. Okay, my personal opinion real quick, I've always found that interesting that they've got blacklisted from the fucking fanverse. Some people may argue that they're just lying to make themselves look cooler or whatnot, but you be the judge of that. Sheep Rampage. Sheep Rampage is a YouTuber that covers a variety of topics in the indie horror genre, especially FNAF. Spanning nearly his entire YouTube career, he's always been accused of by multiple people in the FNAF community as a clickbaiter in the same vein as Feth King. Sheep was also one of the main people behind the Fazbear Fan vs. Dead and cancelled videos that kept being made. However, after the controversy involving King Card and Feth King, Sheep was quick to make a response on his community tab on his channel, addressing and acknowledging the criticisms made against the fanverse videos he was making, and believe it or not, this response of his was mostly seen as mature, which was said to be very unlike how Feth King acknowledged his criticisms. Sheep is still making videos to this day that is considered clickbait, but ultimately, due to what he's proven with his response from previous criticisms, people at the same time acknowledge that Sheep still has likable qualities to him after all. Squimpus McGrimpus grooming accusations. Now, before I begin this entry, I'm going to real quick state again that the victim is not going to be said or shown by name in this video and is solely going to focus on Squimpus himself, all just to help in making sure this situation doesn't become a quote-unquote spectacle like the victim wished in their call-out. Just as a fair warning, Squimpus McGrimpus is known for creating FNAF VHS, which was basically the series that kicked off the FNAF analog horror subgenre on YouTube. His videos were considered high quality, and even at first were still some of the best FNAF analog horror content among people, whether that be people found it genuinely creepy or its iconic moments like
Criminal.
On March 17th, 2023, a thread, mostly in the form of a video, would be posted onto Twitter calling him out for grooming a minor, specifically exchanging NSFW drawings with someone Squimpus knew for years was a minor and knowing it was wrong. Squimpus was 17, the victim was 14, and even though there's an argument to be made that since Squimp was 17 when this started, he gets some leeway, he continued this behavior into adulthood. Like, it went as far as it eventually being Squimp being 20 and the victim being 16. He even confessed to it on a private friend server. There was also even a power imbalance because of the victim being a fan of his work. As well, there were allegedly other victims. It's just that the highlighted one in the initial call-out thread that got popular, well, is the only highlighted one. Squimpus would eventually respond to this, i.e. the same day, basically confessing to it and issuing an apology and a statement that he was going to leave and maybe return someday. Of course, this response was met with a lot of people telling him to leave, most infamously using the image from the FNAF 2 Custom Night windscreen telling Fritz great and to get out after being fired and issued the pink slip. And since then, Squimpus has indeed left the public eye. It's just something about it whenever a respected creator is accused and outed for something like this. It puts my mind in circles because of how crazy it is that a creator would do something like this. Martine Wall's death. This entry is referring to how on April 13th, 2022, the creator of various FNAF VHS videos on YouTube, Baddington02, posted a tweet that read #RipMW, and attached was a memorial video with the Walton Files cast in it. Everyone that saw it were either questioning the legitimacy of the tweet, or were scared, or even devastated by what was supposedly the death of Walton Files creator Martine Walls. However, a few minutes later, Baddington tweeted this out. In short, it was all a big joke and prank which was meant to comment on how inactive Martine Walls was at the time due to being in college. This little joke was unsurprisingly met with outrage among the FNAF and VHS community, citing the joke as tasteless, and some even getting more upset by how Baddington was supposedly playing this off as good intentions. This situation would wake Martine up from his inactivity to make a response which wasn't directly towards Baddington, but the response was still obviously prompted because of his prank. A lot of people were upset at Baddington for this, especially Squimpus McGrimpus, who was the original creator of the FNAF VHS series and basically who popularized the concept of FNAF analog horror in VHS. Baddington would remake Squimpus' original videos in his own flair, which were popular. Squimpus would reply to the prank saying, "I don't want to see you remaking any of my videos anymore," with Baddington replying with, "Understandable." However, the videos are actually still up, but nonetheless, this situation would overall leave a severe black mark on Baddington's career. The baddest Islamophobia. Isaac, otherwise known as the Baddest, is a FNAF essay YouTuber who has brought to relevance and popularity around the release of Security Breach, which he has been famously or infamously, depending on who you ask, known for hating Security Breach on the same level as Fistnum. He's a part of the newer age of FNAF YouTubers on the lines of Dag, Zoya, Postra, and more. However, on September 25th, 2022, he tweeted out the following: "It's almost like Islam is an outrageously horrible thing that the Western world doesn't like to critique because it's a religion that predominantly brown people subscribe to. you, quote unquote. This tweet was seen as Islamophobic and was criticized by multiple people, and the baddest kinda went on a downward spiral on Twitter from there, making tweets that people thought was making the situation worse. People thinking that he was trying to play the victim card. However, though, this controversy didn't have any lasting impact because the baddest still uploads, still tweets, and is still active on the internet just like from before, so yeah. MatPat's first FNAF theory. So basically, this is an example of something that when it initially released, nothing happened, but over time, people got upset. This time, it's about MatPat's first ever Five Nights at Freddy's theory, game theory. Five Nights at Freddy's, the scariest monster is you. In this theory, MatPat relates the events of FNAF 1 and the murder children incident to a shooting that happened in real life at a Chuck E. Cheese establishment in Aurora, Colorado on December 14th, 1993. Essentially what happened was a former employee at the Chuck E. Cheese location previously stated, Nathan Dunlap, shot and killed 4 people and injured one when they were cleaning up for the night as revenge for being fired 5 months prior. He also took some of the restaurant's items and money and fled the scene and would later be caught and found guilty for first-degree murder, attempted murder, and multiple other charges and would be sentenced to death row via lethal injection. However, by 2020, Colorado abolished the death penalty, so Dunlap would be just downgraded to life in prison without parole. Now, MatPat tied this whole tragedy to the story that was mysteriously placed in FNAF 1, linking the unnamed killer at the time to Dunlap and the victims of the tragedy to the 5 child victims in the game. Like I stated before, back then this theory was not seen as controversial, but nowadays this old theory is considered in the FNAF community as either distasteful and disrespectful to the 1993 tragedy's victims, and or just generally stupid and extremely far-fetched, and people have shown their open disgust and disdain for the theory on places like Twitter and YouTube. MatPat is a semi-controversial figure in the FNAF community due to some of his theories throughout the years being seen as stupidly outlandish, which you can already guess by the fact that earlier in the iceberg, we talked about one of his more recent theories, and believe it or not, this is not the last entry on this iceberg where we're going to talk about him. FNAF vs. VizzyPop. Now, FNAF fans have gone to hot water with VizzyPop's fandom. Basically, VizzyPop is known for Crane, has been a hotel, and hell of a boss, and essentially, there's 2 situations involving this. Firstly, back in January 2020, a portion of FNAF fans privately coordinated a raid on the Has-Been Hotel wiki after the pilot was starting to gain popularity. FNAF fans ended up deleting a lot of the pages from the wiki and started vandalizing it, mostly with memes. In the second situation, this involves Scott Cawthon and the whole donation controversy. Basically, VizzyPop was responding to a friend of hers that was stating their thoughts on the controversy, which was anti-Scott Cawthon, and VizzyPop ended up getting doxxed. Whether you're on the FNAF side or the Vizzy side is up to you. Top 10 Gaming. Top 10 Gaming is a channel on YouTube dedicated to making top 10 videos on multiple topics, but mostly gaming and mostly FNAF. Yeah, this channel is another case to people as a FNAF content farm in the same vein as a Ludum due to their mass uploads on the same topic over and over. However, this channel is way more controversial because along with the content farm, they've actually done some things that people did not like at all. One example being the stolen fan render in their channel banner, which goes uncredited. That also goes for the thumbnails yet again, uncredited. Another example is how quote-unquote sexual and depraved their video topics and thumbnails are becoming. Another example that I recall people being up in arms about them over is their top 10 worst FNAF fan games video, where most of the games on the list were developed by children and or beginners, and instead of constructive criticism, he would just outright harshly make fun of them, going as far as to make a whole video dedicated to playing and shitting more on the number 1 game on his worst list, which was Five Nights at the Car, a FNAF fan game that was obviously made by a young child trying to see if they could make a FNAF fan game. This channel is not very well liked by people, and when they're brought up among the FNAF community, you only ever see mockery, memery, and genuine discussions of how awful their content is. Ellis Mark's fan game video. Oh boy, so basically Ellis Mark is primarily an animation reviewer on YouTube. He's known for his cartoon rankings and cartoon essay videos and all that jazz, but sometimes he dabbles into gaming, and FNAF is one of his main and most popular non-animation topics on his channel. As of writing this video, he's made a total of 5 videos on the series. His FNAF retrospective, his review of Security Breach, his retrospective on the FNAF books, and an essay detailing the decline of Afton, and then, the topic of this entry, and by far the most infamous example, his FNAF fan game video. In this video, he would be covering a multitude of FNAF fan games, both popular and not as popular. However, this video was quickly brought into infamy among the FNAF community because of how it seemed Mark didn't even actually play most of the games he talked about in the video, or he only played a little bit of them. This claim was identified by the fact that before the video's release, Mark was live on Twitch playing a few of the games he talked about on stream. He played Final Fantasy Sonic's Maniac Mania for 10 minutes, all that time being spent on playing at night with everyone at 0 AI and being confused as to why there was nothing going on. He also played Treasure Island for 28 minutes, The Joy Creation for 15 minutes and didn't beat any level, one day at Flumpty's for 12 minutes, but he actually did beat it, and then most infamously, he played Pop Goes for only 4 minutes and died at 1 AM on night 1 because of the panic meter. Because of all this, there was misinformation present in the video, such as how Mark claimed there was doors in Pop Goes, and on top of misinformation, this video was seen as extremely harsh among the community for what was essentially passion projects. This situation got worse on Twitter when active FNAF community member Watch the Skies posted his findings and details of Mark's fan game stream on Twitch, which in return Mark himself replied with, "You're aware I have the ability to play video games by myself." He received immediate backlash and ratios, and Ellis Mark's reputation in the FNAF community was said to be completely ruined after that. To this day, Mark still creates videos on occasion about FNAF, which some people in the community either appreciate or outright just don't like. Fan renders and Help Wanted teaser. So, around the time Help Wanted was in development, there were teasers for the game on ScottGames.com, and one of the teasers essentially had the animatronics in some blue-greenish coloring. What was so special about this one teaser, though, was some of the animatronic models in the teaser were not actually Steel Wool's models and were taken from the internet. People were quick to point this out and talk about it. The Funtime Foxy model that was used was fan-made, and the other huge example was the Spring Bonnie model from Pop Goes. Kane Carter himself has even commented on this when the teaser first started gaining traction, and in a surprise twist of events, he thought it was pretty funny. Of course, the teaser would later be changed to remove the fan models when Steel Wool and Scott took notice of the mistake they made. They also even publicly acknowledged and apologized for the mistake. People went on to assume that Steel Wool and Scott learned from their otherwise minor mistake, and it was just a thing from the past in regards to Help Wanted's development. FNAF movie sign. This entry is concerning the community's response to the Freddy Fazbear's Pizza sign that is going to be used in the FNAF movie. When the sign got revealed to the public, it was met with immediate backlash from people, claiming that the gloves on Freddy aren't suitable for him, people just saying the design in general looks terrible or is drawn awfully. Hell, it's even been accused of being traced from Lady Fissy. There's also people that claim this to be a complete overreaction and that it's not going to make or break the movie. There's even an argument made that the reason why it looks the way it does is to emphasize the fact on how Fazbear Entertainment is a corner-cutting company. That's really all there is. It's only this far down due to how obscure the hate for this movie sign is, usually only found on Twitter. Fun Times at Homer's N-word. Fun Times at Homer's is a FNAF fan game series based on The Simpsons, developed by Nick Person. Basically, this controversy centers around how for one of the teasers for the upcoming Fun Times at Homer's 3, the N-word can be seen not in the teaser image itself, but in the Game Jolt tagline. It was since been removed. People were not happy about this, thinking it was racist at worst, and at best, a poor attempt to be edgy. Now, the developer Nick actually left a comment on my fan game Iceberg explaining the situation more and defending himself, but I can't find it now for some reason, which sucks. So there is a part to this that is sadly going to be missing from this Iceberg. Apologies. King Carter Markiplier. Basically, Markiplier uploaded a video of himself playing Locked in Sewer, which is a FNAF fan game with only slightly above 200 followers as of me writing the script. King Carter took notice of this and also saw a clip from Markiplier detailing how he doesn't know what FNAF Plus or the Fazbear Fanverse initiative is.
Will I play Five Nights at Freddy's Plus? I don't even know what that is. What is that? What is that? Officially licensed and published under the Fazbear Fanverse initiative. I don't know anything about that.
Kane decided to tweet asking who in Markiplier's supposed team is letting them know about Locked in Sewer, but not the Fanverse or Plus. Then Markiplier proceeded to reply to Kane, asking him about Kane thinking Markiplier has a team. Kane then started to get defensive. This led to numerous amounts of replies and eventually harassment and death threats to Kane that he eventually privated his Twitter account and blocked numerous others. The general consensus in the community was that while Kane didn't deserve much death threats and harassment, he shouldn't be crying about what Markiplier plays on his channel, especially when it comes to games created within the brand he's a part of. It's complex, and as of writing this script, this is the most recent controversy that happened in the FNAF community. Adult Theory. This theory is one of the more older but still controversial theories, this being sister location related, and this theory coming up before the release of the game. The theory actually being created by Popco's developer himself, Kane Carter. The theory goes is that the Funtime animatronics from sister location were meant to be used as adult entertainment and were basically animatronic strippers and prostitutes. The main evidence that was used was the booking schedule that existed around this time to tease sister location. This theory is highly controversial due to how crazy people thought it was, considering FNAF was never a series like this. What made people more crazed was the overwhelming amount of support this theory still received. Obviously it ended up not being true, but this is a 2016 FNAF community relic at its finest. Kane Carter Finance of Warriors. This controversy basically centers around how Kane Carter back in late 2021 expressed his disdain for the Five Nights at Wario series. Kane saw people making fan game tier lists and people praising the graphics of Wario's, which he heavily disagreed with, and made somewhat of a meme parody image where it's a Wario model with Shutterstock watermark image, obviously satirizing how the graphics are basically stock images. The developer of Wario's, WW Wario, responded to it, and basically him and Kane had it back and forth. When this happened, some people thought Kane had a right to his opinion, whereas other people were upset because of how Kane's a fan versus developer, it should be a good influence. It was another divided case. PewDiePie FNAF 4. This entry is referring to PewDiePie's reaction to the fourth game in the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise.
The thing is, like, everyone wants me to play this game to get scared, but after 4 games, I don't know what to tell you. You know there's just gonna be jump scares. If there's something else than that, then maybe I'll be scared, but it's like, if you know what to expect, then 4 times, then it's kind of like over. Go away. I don't know.
Basically, PewDiePie made a statement on how by the 4th game in the series, FNAF was no longer scary due to expecting the scares and horror over the course of 4 games. This was seen as controversial because of how at the time, there were people who got upset at PewDiePie for this, but there were also people who full-on agreed. This whole notion reached to Scott, who made FNAF 4 to be the true finale to the FNAF franchise as a result of Springtrap's jumpscare in FNAF 3 not being seen as scary. Since a similar situation from before of people being dissatisfied with the scares happened again, Scott made more FNAF games. Another situation that is said to be another reason why FNAF as a franchise kept going after it was supposed to end. The Freddy Files. The Freddy Files is the name of a small sub-series of official FNAF books that basically serve the purpose of being general guides to the series, whether it be detailing characters, giving gameplay tips, lore hints, and all that jazz. There would usually be a new book in this sub-series whenever a new FNAF game releases, or even multiple across the span of a few years. They also even cover the FNAF novels. There's a total of 4 books in this series: the original Freddy Files, which centers around FNAF 1, the sister location, including the Silver Eyes and Twisted ones, the Freddy Files Updated Edition, which adds on Pizzeria Simulator, Ultimate Custom Night, the Fourth Closet, and even the Survival Logbook, FNAF the Ultimate Guide, which adds on Help Wanted, Special Delivery, and every Fazbear's Fright book except for Felix the Shark, and the final being the Security Breach Files, which unlike the previous books where it still has the previous games and novels from the previous book of that respective book, this one literally only focuses on Security Breach. Now, the reason why these books are seen as controversial and infamous is because of how extremely often it is found that these books include fan renders of characters. This literal attack map of Ultimate Custom Night from the updated edition of the Freddy Files being a huge example. Fan renders are heavily present throughout, Freddy, Bonnie, Rockstar Chica, and Trash to the Game being some examples, and literally Nightmare Bonnie's quote-unquote render on here literally being the head of the Nightmare Bonnie Funko figure. These guidebooks are also often accused of misinformation in some areas, and with the most recent guidebook, the Security Breach Files, that one was quick to get accused in the community of misinformation, as well as not enough information. I wonder what's going to happen if a new FNAF game releases, and if there's still going to be another Freddy Files book that's going to cover that game. Who knows? FNAF movie trailer leak. On May 6th, the official trailer for the Five Nights at Freddy's movie got leaked online. How it got leaked was basically that the trailer was shown during a survey that was supposed to track general interest in upcoming films. However, the person recorded it and posted it. Their survey ID was displayed on screen, which could get the person in trouble, basically breaking their NDA. Everyone was up in arms about this. There were people who decided to take a look at the trailer even in its quality, and there were people who refused to see it and decided to wait for Blumhouse's eventual official release of the trailer in HD. Scott Cawthon himself would even address this on Reddit by stating how upset he was about the leak, but he was excited for people to see the finalized trailer with sound effects and VFX. And he was also being thankful of the people who decided not to spread around the trailer in its current state. With all this though, turmoil of course occurred, and the person who leaked the trailer even got harassed and received death threats, so yeah. real pizzerias being called. Back in 2015, a lot of fans were looking in the source code of ScottGames.com for clues in regards to FNAF 4, the upcoming FNAF game at the time, and a bunch of 8s and 7s were found. Even though it was meant to be a reference to the Bite of 87, fans put the numbers into Google Maps and found an actual pizzeria, and thinking it was tied with FNAF, fans started mass calling the pizzeria about FNAF. The callers would usually consist of little kids and theorists. Eventually, someone close to the pizzeria's location posted on the FNAF subreddit telling people that the pizzeria is not tied to FNAF and to stop calling them. The employees were getting pissed about the matter. Scott Cawthon would even comment on the post, encouraging people to stop calling the number and that no phone numbers are associated with the FNAF series. Because of this, Scott would consistently remind people over the years to not do something like this. Little did he know, though, it would happen again. In 2016, another pizzeria would be mass called by FNAF fans asking about FNAF, and the only reason people were doing so was because, well, the pizzeria was just called Freddy's. Yep. That's it. The place was literally spelled with an IE and not a Y, so yeah. Scott would continue to discourage this behavior. Ultimate Custom Night mobile trailer. For the official trailer for the mobile port of Ultimate Custom Night by Click Team, it showed at the end a jump scare from a fan model of Nightmare Inn. This was quickly brought into light by fans, which resulted in this trailer being removed and it getting re-uploaded, but with the actual in-game Nightmare Inn jump scare this time instead of a fan model. Stealing fan models galore. FNAF NFTs. Everyone knows what a non-fungible token is by now and why they're considered extremely controversial. They're constantly accused of being a scam, hurting the environment, and so many other things. A lot of franchises have NFT products about them, which is usually seen as a bad thing among people on the internet masses. NFTs exist in a variety of ways, from just simple pictures to literal fucking shows. Now, back in 2021, Scott Cawthon was approached by an NFT company called Wax Blockchain to create official Five Nights at Freddy's NFTs. Scott Cawthon, being unaware of what NFTs were, agreed to make them. Later, an article was posted from this company about the upcoming NFTs that are in production, and when the FNAF community noticed that Five Nights at Freddy's was on there, the community went on an uproar. People were trying to get Scott's attention as an attempt to get him to cancel the NFTs. It was up until a post was posted on the FNAF subreddit describing what NFTs were and the situation at hand, as well as clearing up any misconceptions in regards to NFTs. Scott Cawthon would basically comment on the post, asking for clarification on NFTs out of utter confusion. He even assumed that NFTs were like fidget spinners of all things, which, to be fair, you could argue that based off of the acronym NFTs, someone with no knowledge on the subject could assume that it's a type of digital collectibles or merch, which is exactly what Scott thought. People were able to clarify to him exactly what NFTs were and why they were so controversial, which got Scott to cancel the FNAF NFTs. Most people were glad that they were canceled, although some people were disappointed in the fact that Scott didn't do any research before agreeing to make a deal with another company, but whatever. Tanner Feline. Tanner Feline is the developer of Original Location, and he's semi-controversial for being the fourth unofficial member of the pair. He would basically make a game journal post that basically outed himself. He would participate in the group chats that the other three pair members were speaking in, and even said slurs. Tanner would try to throw the pair members under the bus, too. This post was not received that well by people, and Tanner Feline has left the public sphere, it seems. Interesting how he outed himself in all honesty. Exiler Guy. Exiler Guy is the developer of Night Shift, and essentially back in 2022, he got into contact with a minor and started sending NSFW images and videos to him. One video sent to the minor literally contained memes, sensitive imagery depicting men, fetish drawings, even of minors, Nikocado Avocado's OnlyFans image, and more. But most importantly, what the video depicted later on, let's just call it cheese pizza. Just take the acronym of that and you know what I'm talking about. This cheese pizza basically contained two images of children with their genitals and other specific parts of their body, and one image of three children engaging in sexual activity. Exiler Guy was also found to be racist, homophobic, transphobic, etc. Another time I'll break away from my unbiased angle from this video real quick. You can't be sending minors stuff like that, like, at all. What the fuck, man? Dude seems to be gone from the community, thankfully, though. Thomastus. Thomastus was a streamer associated with the FNAF community, and in December 2020, he would be exposed for grooming a 13-year-old by having sexual interactions with them and getting them to send lewd images. He would make an apology video, but after the amount of hate it got, it was since deleted. However, this would be seemingly debunked by the supposed 13-year-old, stating that they never dated, even having a boyfriend, and they only engaged in lewd art requests and roleplays, calls, and that sorts. Thomas Dis also has just been proven to be an apparent dick by destroying the Discord server of PuppyGamer11, a former friend of his and some of you may know as the main developer behind the 1A with the Box series. He would destroy the server by means of wiping out a lot of the server, whether that be channels, roles, and more. This person seems to no longer be relevant in the FNAF community anymore, so yeah. Candyland. Candyland is a FNAF-inspired animated web series created by Golden Lane Studios, one of the creators in the FNAF community from back in the day. The controversy comes in with the studio they partnered up with, Rowdy Ruse, which is an NFT company, and it turns out Candyland's an NFT brand. NFTs are extremely controversial already, but what makes this case controversial among FNAF fans is the fact that people believe there was genuine promise in this IP, with the character designs and animation, but they can't support it now because NFTs are tied to it. It's a shame. GGY. GGY is the first story of Tales from the Pizzaplex number 5, the Bobby Dots Clubclusion. This story is regarded as controversial among FNAF fans because of how, while it disproves Gregbot, it confirms or at least heavily implies Patient 46 from Security Breach is in fact Gregory. People are upset because they think it further ruins the lore of both Security Breach and FNAF. And you know, FNAF lore and theories rage galore. There's people content with it, but there's also the people that are not. Some hope that Security Breach Ruin will touch up on this, but who knows. B7. B7 is the name of the third story from the second Tales from the Pizzaplex book, Hops. Essentially, the story was about this kid named Billy who would consistently watch this show while in medical care called Freddy and Friends. Obviously being a direct parallel to the Freddy and Friends show from FNAF 4. Billy would imitate Freddy's movements and want to become an animatronic. As he would grow older, he would get plastic surgery to become more like an animatronic. He would dye his eyes black, drink motor oil, cut off body parts to replace them with robotic metal ones, and more. By the end of the story, Billy would come to the conclusion that he was not intended to be an animatronic, and that unfortunately, all the surgeries he's been through are all irreversible, making him stuck as an animatronic forever. And as a final nail in the coffin, to put more misery and suffering on Billy, he horrifically dies from getting crushed inside a car at the junkyard. Now, this story is seen as controversial among the FNAF community because of how there's a decent amount in this story's plot that relates to being transgender, sex operations, all of that, and with the ending of the story, it has led some FNAF fans to call this story transphobic. Those fans were obviously upset about it. Now, the author of the story, Andrea Wagner, has publicly even made a response on the FNAF subreddit to clear up any of the accusations in regards to this story, and basically B7 was always intended to be and was written to be just another creepy horror story, and there was no attempt at any sort of commentary on gender, race, religion, and etc., both on Andrea's part and Scott Cawthon's part, as well apologizing for making fans upset about the correlations. Now, this response was well received for the most part. There was even people from the beginning that didn't see the story as transphobic and just saw it as another FNAF novel story. This message from the author has even made people in the community that thought it was transphobic before go back to thinking it was just a creepy story. However, there were still people that call this story transphobic regardless of the author's intention or not, and that a story's quality is based on the reader's interpretation. Some people are obviously upset at those people because of how they claim they make their transphobic accusations out to be as facts, even with the author's public clarifications denying it, but it's just another FNAF community debate. Scott Cawthon changing his phone number. Around when Help Wanted was releasing and people had early access to it, people took notice Silver Parasoft Games, which is the fictional company that developed the FNAF VR game in the game's universe. For some reason though, people took it upon themselves to research this company and found a website for this company most likely made by a fan. What set red alarms though was that Scott Cawthon's literal fucking phone number was on the website. Scott would start receiving calls from fans and he would post on Reddit being utterly confused why this number was even public, even though it got doxxed, and that he would be changing his phone number. He most likely did, and yeah. This is a case of personal information being revealed without actual consent and kind of goes with the calling phone numbers associated with FNAF type of deal. Five Nights at the Haunted House. I've talked about this game before in my fan game Iceberg, but to essentially summarize the whole thing, as hopefully most FNAF fans know, there are mobile FNAF games on the Google Play Store that are not regarded in the best quality. It may even contain in-app purchases or literally the games themselves costing money. With all of this though, there was one game in the bunch that was brought into infamy thanks to YouTube coverage. But anyway, this game was called Five Nights at the Haunted House. I say was because it's no longer available on the Google Play Store, and as I'm gonna get into, the majority would say it's for good reason. This game was brought into severe infamy and controversy because of how at the beginning of the game, before a night would start, it would start off with the newspaper articles just like in a lot of FNAF games or fan games or any FNAF related media ever. However, these newspapers would unfortunately depict 2 actual missing people from real life that were not even just missing but were also confirmed to be dead. There's 2 newspapers in total. The first newspaper depicting 14-year-old Suzanne Bombardier, who in 1980 was kidnapped, sexually assaulted, stabbed to death, was then found a week later dead in a river. And the second newspaper depicts 24-year-old Tammy Niver, who in 1993 went missing and was killed. The obvious point as to why this was seen as heavily controversial was because of how distasteful it all was, thanks to how they were used and portrayed. Literally being used as placeholders for victims of a burnt-down location in the game's story, the victims now haunting the location of the game. People nowadays are thankful that the game is no longer playable, and it's been removed from the Google Play Store, and is seen as a tip for what not to do when creating a FNAF-related game or project.
Reimagining Security Breach.
Reimagining Security Breach is a video on YouTube created by Nick Carlson Press, released on New Year's Eve 2022 going into 2023. The goal of the video in question was to serve as a complete rewrite, reimagining, and redo of Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach, a FNAF game that is seen as heavily controversial in the FNAF community, which I already talked about in the first layer of the iceberg. The first few minutes of this video are dedicated to listing the issues Nick had with Security Breach, and then he got into the reimagining part of the video, which is where the controversy of the video stems from. The reimagining, so to say, details what is essentially child gore and mutilation. It is also shown in the video as artwork drawn by Mickey on Twitter. What made people truly upset was the fact that with this in the video, there was no warning originally stating there was going to be such imagery and descriptions in it. The thumbnail now has a trigger warning, but it was added after Twitter erupted over it. As soon as the video got traction and took off in views, people started getting upset about it. Some people have even taken minor issue with the fact that the video allegedly stole a Claremont Chica redesign, which was eventually credited in the description of the video. 5 days later, on January 5th, 2023, Nick made a video discussing the aftermath of the Reimagining Security Breach video. He basically takes fault for the Claremont Chica redesign stealing point, but he would go on to defend himself against the points about gore in FNAF, even stating that the gore was not even the focus of the reimagining, but more so just to be scary in general. Some people were fine with his response, some were not. Some people defended Nick because of the fact he's a horror writer and seemingly knows his stuff, while some people have started debates on whether or not the reimagining that Nick presented in his video was too much for a game franchise like Five Nights at Freddy's. It's all just a mess of a situation.
FNAF ARG.
With the release of Fazbear Frights number 12, Felix the Shark, back in April 2022, the book had 3 stories with the same theme of characters going out of their way to search for certain things, and the message being a curiosity killed the cat type of game. MatPat would cover this book on Game Theory. In the video, Game Theory FNAF has stumped me again. Basically, it would turn out that what MatPat got from the book was that there was a scrapped FNAF ARG. If you don't know what an ARG is, first off, it's an acronym for Alternate Reality Game, but in terms of what it is, it's basically an interactive narrative involving the real world. There's a lot of them covered online. But yeah, MatPat basically came to the conclusion that FNAF ARG once existed, and there was FNAF stuff to be found in Utah since that's where the original games and books took place in, including where the protagonist of The Scoop, the second story from Felix the Shark, went snooping around for what they wanted to search for. He basically prompted fans to participate in this ARG hunt and post what they found on the Game Theory subreddit. This included calling businesses, going out of their way to go to these businesses, even considering breaking into these places, and so much more. Basically causing harassment in Utah. Not too long after, an employee of a small diner in Utah went to the Game Theory subreddit to tell people to stop calling them and harassing them about FNAF and to do the same for the other businesses people were doing this shit with. The situation with this small diner in particular got so bad that for the remainder of the night during their shift, the small diner had to shut the main phone line down. Some fans thought this was part of the ARG and to throw them off the trail, and some fans were just pissed in general for ruining the fun. So the employees started responding to those comments, and it got to the employees so much that they declared they would stop responding and straight up deleted their Reddit account. A few days later, another person went to the subreddit to ask for this to stop as well, even confirming that a water park that used to have a shark mascot, which fans likely saw as a parallel to Felix the Shark, got these calls and harassment too. By far though, what got the FNAF community the most people upset was that someone found a grave of a man that died in 1987, posted an image of the gravestone online, and he suggested to dig up the grave for clues, which is so fucking illegal, even if all of this wasn't already. Thankfully though, this would conclude for the most part when MatPat made a video putting a stop to this wild goose chase. This video was received well for the most part and served as another cautionary tale in the FNAF community to not dig your nose in places it doesn't belong. Oh boy, that was something. Now, I don't know what was more interesting for me to cover, the FNAF fan game iceberg or this iceberg, because the truth is that they both were very interesting to go over. With this one, to be fair, a lot of these controversies I knew about, but only a good bit. I knew almost every detail. Some of these I've heard about and have even known the general basis of the controversy, but never got to know the full story, and some I just never heard about and it caught me all by surprise. However, I hope that this video serves its purpose. I've already stated in the intro of this video, but the reason for this video's existence is to not ignite dead flames. It's to serve as a reminder for any new fan in the FNAF community it's not all sunshine and rainbows. There are bad apples in this community. The truth is that there's always going to be bad apples in any community. However, there are some people that don't actually know. Engaging in any fandom can be fun. It's fun for me a good bit of the time, and I'm sure a lot of you guys enjoy bits of the fandom as well. However, as I'll say again, it's not perfect and it cannot be ignored. I hope that either all the information or almost all of it is true and also mostly unbiased, so it can serve as an informative and detailed video I intended it to be. Thanks for watching, everyone. I'll be making more iceberg videos in the future. I'll see you all in the next thing I do. Goodbye, everyone.